It was the kind of morning that felt like any other, but for Elias Harper, it was a day that would change everything. He never expected his breath to be the thing that made him stand out. When Elias walked into the small cafe, his usual spot to enjoy a quiet coffee before heading to work, he didn't notice the way the air seemed to ripple around him. It wasn't until he reached the counter that the strange looks began. The barista, a young woman with a bright smile, hesitated, her hand frozen in mid-air as she reached for a cup. "Are you okay?" Elias asked, noticing her unusual reaction. Her eyes widened, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Yeah, just, never mind." Elias chuckled to himself, brushing off the odd interaction. He ordered his coffee, paid, and sat by the window, as he always did. But as he sipped his drink, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The cafe, usually bustling with chatter, felt unnervingly quiet. People around him had stopped talking, eyes flicking nervously toward him and then away. As the day went on, the strange occurrences continued. At the grocery store, people avoided him, giving him wide, fearful glances. His co-workers acted differently around him, their conversations abruptly halting when he entered the room. One of his colleagues, Thomas, who had always been friendly, suddenly asked, "Hey, are you feeling all right, Elias?" His tone was sharp, almost accusatory. "Yeah, why?" Elias responded, bewildered. "I'm fine." Thomas glanced over his shoulder as if making sure no one else was listening before lowering his voice. "You're different. I'm not sure how to explain it, but you're not like you used to be." Elias was perplexed, but as the days passed, the comments and odd stares grew more frequent. People at work began to speak in hushed tones whenever he walked by, and he overheard snippets of conversation, phrases like, "Did you feel that?" and "Something's wrong with him." His physical appearance hadn't changed. He was still the same Elias, average height, brown hair, and a face that was neither striking nor unremarkable. So what was it? It wasn't until the first doctor's appointment that Elias began to understand the truth. The test results were immediate. The nurse took one look at the blood sample, her face going pale. She quickly called in Dr. Anderson, the head physician, who arrived with a grave expression. "Mr. Harper," he said, his voice low and filled with uncertainty, "I've never seen anything like this. Your body, it's in perfect condition, better than perfect. Your cells, your organs, everything is functioning at an efficiency level that's not human." "What do you mean?" Elias asked, suddenly feeling a sense of dread creeping in. "You're breathing too pure," Dr. Anderson said slowly, as if trying to make sense of the words. "It's as if your body is filtering out all toxins, all impurities, at an accelerated rate. It's unnatural." Elias felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This was the moment he realized that whatever was happening to him, it wasn't just an oddity. Something far bigger, far more dangerous, was unfolding, and he had no idea how or why. As the doctor began to explain that they would need more tests, Elias's mind raced. What did this mean? Why was this happening to him? And what consequences lay ahead for a man whose breath was too pure for the world to understand? The truth, it seemed, was just beginning to unfold. Days passed, and Elias found himself trapped in a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and isolation. The tests kept coming, each more invasive than the last. Doctors from across the world had gathered to study him, but the more they learned about his condition, the more perplexed they became. His blood, his DNA, everything about him seemed flawless. Too flawless. Dr. Anderson had been one of the first to suggest that Elias's condition wasn't just rare, it was impossible. The breath, the purity of his lungs, it was something that no human should have been capable of. "Your respiratory system is functioning in a way that transcends human biology," he had said, his voice tinged with awe and fear. But it wasn't long before the fear began to spread. News outlets caught wind of Elias's strange condition, and rumors flooded the internet. Headlines screamed, "Man's breath too pure for humanity and new disease spreads through unlikely source." The media painted him as a potential threat, a biological anomaly that could bring about the end of humankind. Elias found himself growing more isolated by the day. People he had once called friends began to distance themselves. At work, his colleagues whispered behind closed doors, casting furtive glances his way when they thought he wasn't looking. The tension in the air was palpable. It wasn't long before the government got involved. One morning, a team of specialists arrived at his apartment, demanding that he accompany them to an undisclosed location for further tests. "Mr. Harper," one of the agents said with a stern look, "it's in your best interest to comply. We need to understand what's happening to you before it escalates." Elias hesitated. He didn't trust them, but what choice did he have? He was being treated like a lab experiment, his own body something foreign to him. The agents escorted him to a high-security facility, where he was put under constant surveillance. They performed endless tests, analyzing his breath, his cells, his every physiological response. He was getting sick of it. The more they tested him, the more he realized that they didn't care about him, they cared about what he could do for them, or perhaps against them. Then came the breakthrough, the first moment when things began to take a darker turn. It happened one evening, when Elias was alone in his sterile, white-walled room. He had been staring out the window, contemplating his next move, when a sudden shift in the air made him pause. His breath had always felt light, effortless, like he was breathing in the purest air. But now, there was something different. Something colder, darker. A scientist had slipped into his room unnoticed, an older man with a sharp, calculating look in his eyes. "You don't know what you're dealing with, do you, Elias?" the man said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Your breath, it's not a gift. It's a curse." Elias turned to face him, his heart pounding. "What do you mean? I don't understand. I didn't ask for this." The scientist stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with something akin to fear, or perhaps greed. "Your breath is pure, yes, but it's not just clearing toxins. It's filtering out all the bad, all the things that make humans, well, human. And the longer this goes on, the less human you'll become." Elias felt a chill run through him. He wanted to run, to escape, but the weight of the scientist's words kept him rooted in place. His breath, the very thing that had once been his lifeline, had become a danger. As the scientist spoke of the potential consequences, Elias realized that the world saw him as both a weapon and a liability. The government feared that his condition would spread, that it would lead to the creation of a new kind of human being, one too perfect for the world to handle. They didn't know whether they could control it or if it would destroy them all. The scientist's warning echoed in Elias's mind, "You're becoming something else, something dangerous." But what was Elias supposed to do? He had no control over his condition, no way of reversing what was happening to him. The doctors were at a loss. They couldn't find an answer, only questions. And with every test, Elias could feel the gap between him and the rest of humanity widening. The government's response came swiftly. They put him under lock and key, a subject of fear and speculation. They wouldn't kill him, not yet, but they were certainly keeping him in isolation, away from the world. The world outside had turned against him. The media painted him as the embodiment of a new and terrifying disease. They called it the purity virus, claiming that it could spread like wildfire and wipe out humanity. But no one knew the truth. Elias wasn't infected with anything. His breath was a biological mystery, something that couldn't be explained by science. It wasn't until he overheard a conversation one night between two agents that Elias learned something shocking. "They want to use him," one agent said, "as a weapon. His breath is like nothing we've ever seen. It could change the course of human evolution." The other agent replied, "And if it kills us all in the process? We won't know unless we try." The words hit Elias like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just a freak of nature to them. He was a tool, a weapon to be wielded. They had no intention of curing him, only controlling him. It was then that Elias made a choice. He would escape. Whatever the world thought of him, whatever they wanted from him, he would find a way to reclaim his life. His breath might be too pure, but his heart was still human. And no one could take that away. But escaping wouldn't be easy. It was only a matter of time before they realized he was gone, and Elias knew the consequences would be dire. Yet, in that moment, for the first time since his condition had begun, he felt a spark of hope. His journey was just beginning. Elias didn't waste any time. The moment he slipped past the guards in the high-security facility, he knew his life had just become a race against the clock. His breath, his cursed gift, had already made him a global sensation. But it had also made him a prisoner, a weapon they would stop at nothing to control. The escape was messy, hurried. He moved through the darkened hallways, barely a shadow in the dim light. Every sound seemed magnified, the scuffle of his shoes on the cold concrete, the pounding of his heart, the soft hiss of his breath as it passed through his lungs. It was as if his own body was conspiring against him, giving away his position with every exhale. But he couldn't afford to think about that now. He had to get out. Elias didn't know where he was running to, only that he couldn't stay there. The government had called in every resource, and the media had painted him as a ticking time bomb. The fear was palpable, and Elias could feel it settling deep in his bones. His breath wasn't just pure, it was a weapon, one the world had never seen before. As he reached the main entrance, the alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed, and voices crackled over loudspeakers, warning him to stop. But Elias didn't stop. He broke through the doors, into the cold night air, and into the unknown. The world was watching now. The world was waiting. But what did Elias have left? He had no family, no friends, just an unexplainable condition that made him a target. His breath was too pure, his body too perfect. Was he human anymore? Or was he something else entirely? The next few days were a blur of fear, confusion, and desperation. Elias ran through the streets, staying off the main roads, avoiding the gaze of the cameras that tracked his every move. He wasn't sure what he was running from anymore, the government, the scientists, or the fear that he was losing his humanity piece by piece. It was during one of these late-night escapes that he encountered the group. At first, he thought they were just another government operation, another team sent to find him. But when they spoke, their words didn't sound like orders, they sounded like a plea. "Elias, we're not your enemies," the leader said, his voice low and urgent. "We know what you are, what they're turning you into." Elias stopped dead in his tracks, his breath hitching in his chest. "Who are you?" His voice was a mixture of fear and anger, distrust clinging to every word. "We're part of a resistance," the man said. "We're trying to stop them from using you as a weapon." The words hit Elias hard. Resistance. He wasn't alone. The leader, who introduced himself as Samuel, went on to explain that Elias wasn't the only one affected. There were others like him, whose bodies had been altered in secret experiments. People who had been turned into tools for war, just like him. They were all part of a program that spanned decades, one designed to create the perfect human soldier, capable of surviving against impossible odds. "You're not the first," Samuel said. "And you won't be the last. But you could be the key to stopping it all." Elias felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by a rising tide of dread. Was he really just another pawn in a game he hadn't asked to play? Had his breath, his very existence, been manipulated to serve someone else's agenda? The resistance was small but fierce, and their objective was clear: stop the government from using Elias's breath as a weapon, stop them from turning him into something that could destroy humanity itself. But the road ahead was fraught with danger. The government had its own plans, and they were already closing in. That night, as Elias lay awake in a safe house, Samuel's words kept replaying in his mind, "You could be the key." But to what end? Elias had never asked for this. He didn't want to be a weapon. He didn't want to be the key to anything. He just wanted to breathe like a normal man again. But Elias knew that wasn't possible anymore. His breath had become something greater, something dangerous. Whether he wanted it or not, he had been thrust into the middle of a silent war, one that would determine the future of humanity itself. As the days passed, the resistance worked to strengthen their network, gathering intel and resources. They knew the stakes were higher than ever. The government had already begun using the knowledge of Elias's condition to create more soldiers, more weapons. Their plan was unfolding, and Elias was at the center of it. And then, one evening, as Elias sat with the resistance members, he felt it, a strange tingling sensation in the air. It was as if the very atmosphere around him had shifted. He wasn't sure how he knew, but deep down, he felt it. The government was coming for him again. But this time, he wouldn't run. He couldn't. The battle was no longer just about survival, it was about control. And Elias had one chance to take control of his own fate. He stood up, a sense of determination coursing through him. "We need to move," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped his heart. Samuel looked at him, his eyes wide. "What are you saying?" "I'm not hiding anymore," Elias replied, his breath steady and calm. "It's time to end this." The quiet tension of the safe house was suddenly shattered as Elias and the resistance prepared to move. Their plan was simple: infiltrate a government facility where they believed the key to Elias's condition was hidden, a facility where the truth about his origins lay buried beneath layers of secrecy. But as they geared up, the heavy realization began to settle on Elias: he was not just a victim of circumstance. He was a pawn, part of something much larger and darker than anyone had imagined. It had only been a few days since his escape, but every moment felt like an eternity. The more Elias learned about the resistance's efforts to stop the government's plans, the more he came to understand the dangerous game that had been played with his life. And the more he learned, the more he began to question everything. Was he truly the key to saving humanity, as Samuel had suggested? Or was he simply the beginning of something far worse? The government's experiments had gone far beyond Elias. Samuel had told him that other children had been born under the same secret program, each one modified to be stronger, faster, and more resilient than the average human. But Elias's condition, his breath, was unlike anything they had seen before. It was the result of something beyond human engineering. It wasn't natural. It wasn't even of Earth. That thought chilled him to the core. As they prepared for the infiltration, Samuel pulled Elias aside, his expression grave. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice low. "The program that created you, it wasn't just human experimentation. It was an alien initiative. The breath, the purity, it was part of a plan to prepare humanity for an alien invasion." Elias stared at him, disbelieving. "What do you mean? Aliens? I don't understand." Samuel sighed, rubbing his hand over his face. "When your ancestors were first modified, it wasn't just a scientific experiment. It was a way to prepare the human race for something. The aliens, those who left their mark on Earth long ago, they believed humanity would be their next threat. They thought humans were evolving too quickly, gaining too much potential. So they manipulated your genes, Elias, and many others before you, hoping to prepare the perfect soldiers who could withstand what was coming. And you're the next step." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Elias's mind raced, trying to process what Samuel had said. It was too much. Too much to believe. How could he, a simple man living a normal life, be part of some cosmic war between alien species? How could his breath, the very thing that had made him a target, be tied to an ancient alien plan. You're telling me, Elias said slowly, his voice trembling, that my breath, my condition, is the result of an alien plan to make humanity strong enough to fight them? Samuel nodded. That's exactly what I'm saying. Your body, Elias, it's not just adapted to fight a virus or disease. It's adapted to fight an alien threat. The weight of Samuel's words crushed Elias's chest. His life, everything he thought he knew, had been built on lies. His existence wasn't a result of a miracle or some divine intervention, it was part of an experiment, a plan that had been set in motion long before his birth. Elias felt a sickening twist in his stomach. For years, he had struggled with the idea that something was wrong with him, that he wasn't quite like other people. Now, he understood why. As the Resistance's preparations continued, Elias couldn't shake the sense of dread that clung to him. If what Samuel said was true, then he wasn't just a weapon of fear, he was part of the reason humanity had survived the millennia. But he had no idea how to use his abilities, how to control the power within him. And worse still, what would happen when the aliens arrived? Would he be their weapon, or would he be their savior? Or perhaps, just perhaps, he would be something much darker than anyone could imagine, a force capable of destroying everything in its path. Later that night, the group set out under the cover of darkness. Their mission was to infiltrate the government's hidden facility, a high-tech, well-guarded complex deep within the heart of the city. Elias knew the risks, but he also knew that this was the only way to get answers. As they approached the facility, Elias's breath felt heavier. It wasn't just the tension of the mission, it was something more. He could feel his body reacting to the air around him, his lungs almost hyper-aware of every inhalation. His breath was becoming a power, a force he couldn't quite control. It pulsed with a strange energy, as though it was being drawn to something within the facility. Something important. As they snuck past security and into the facility's underground tunnels, Elias felt a growing unease. The place was cold, sterile, and eerily silent. It didn't take long for them to reach the heart of the complex, an enormous vault-like room filled with high-tech equipment, data terminals, and sealed containment chambers. "This is it," Samuel whispered. "The truth is here, Elias." The door to the central chamber opened with a hiss, revealing rows of strange artifacts and data logs. At the center of the room stood a large glass chamber, its contents obscured by mist. Elias felt a chill run down his spine as he approached, the air around him growing colder. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the speakers. "Elias Harper. We've been waiting for you." Elias froze. The voice wasn't human, it was cold, mechanical, and filled with an unmistakable sense of authority. Then, the glass chamber began to clear, revealing a figure inside. It was unlike anything Elias had ever seen, tall, with skin that shimmered like liquid metal, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The figure slowly turned toward him, and Elias felt his breath catch in his throat. It was the alien they had been preparing for. And it had been waiting for him all along. The alien stood motionless, its glowing eyes fixed on Elias. The room seemed to shrink around him, the air thickening with an oppressive weight. He could feel his breath quicken, an instinctual response to the presence of something entirely alien. His lungs burned with a strange, unfamiliar sensation, as if his very body recognized the threat before his mind could catch up. "Elias Harper," the alien's voice reverberated through the room, its tone eerie, almost metallic. "You are the key. The final piece." Elias's heart raced. "Key to what? What do you want from me?" The alien's eyes flickered, almost as if it were considering the question. "You were not meant to know. But now, it is too late. Your breath, your purity, it is the catalyst. Humanity has evolved, as we predicted. But it is not your future that is at stake. It is the balance between all life on this world." Elias felt a cold sweat form on his skin. "What balance?" I don't understand. The alien moved slowly, its tall, fluid form shifting unnaturally as it approached the glass barrier. You were never meant to be human. You were designed to be something more. We are the architects of your evolution, Elias. You and others like you. You were created to fight in a war you don't even know has begun. A bitter laugh escaped Elias's lips, a mix of disbelief and fear. A war? Against who? Against us, the alien responded. We have watched you, studied you. You were always our greatest threat. Humanity's growth, your capacity for resistance, your unyielding spirit, these are the very qualities that could challenge us. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. He had suspected that his condition wasn't just random, that something larger was at play, but hearing it confirmed in such stark terms left him shaken. His entire existence had been shaped for a purpose he could not comprehend, a purpose that had never been his choice. The alien continued, its voice colder now. But you are not the first. We have seeded others like you throughout human history, preparing the race to stand against us. You have been watched, tested, and shaped. Your breath is the key to unlocking the next phase. Next phase? What do you mean? Elias demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of defiance and confusion. The alien's eyes seemed to soften, its gaze almost understanding. We gave you the tools, Elias. You were not created to serve us, but to stop us. A final test for humanity to prove its worth. Elias shook his head, his mind racing. I don't want any part of this. I didn't ask for this. You never asked, but you are a part of it, the alien said, its voice now calm and deliberate. And now, you must make a choice. You are the final guardian of this world. Your breath will decide whether your species survives or falls. Elias struggled to process the information, his thoughts scattered. How can I make a choice? I don't even know how this works. I don't know how to control it. You will learn, the alien responded simply. You have no other choice. As it spoke, Elias could feel a strange pressure building in the air. It was as if his breath, that strange, pure breath that had caused him so much pain and confusion, was pulling him towards something deep within himself, something he could no longer ignore. Samuel's voice crackled through his earpiece, breaking through the silence. Elias, are you okay? What's happening? Elias could barely respond. His body felt as if it were vibrating with energy. He could feel the power building within him, the strange purity of his breath pulling him into an unfamiliar space. It was as if his lungs, his very existence, had become a conduit for something beyond human comprehension. The alien moved closer to the glass, its eyes fixed on Elias with a mix of anticipation and calculation. You are more powerful than you know, Elias. But you must choose. Will you fight to protect humanity, or will you allow us to claim what is ours? Elias's mind swirled, caught between the fear of what he didn't understand and the heavy responsibility that was thrust upon him. His breath, pure and unnatural, had become a weapon. But he wasn't sure if he was ready to wield it. I don't want to fight, Elias said, his voice barely a whisper. I just want to live. The alien regarded him with an unreadable expression. Living is no longer a simple choice, Elias. You have been born for this moment. The war is upon us. It is up to you to decide how it ends. The words hung heavy in the air as Elias stood there, his chest rising and falling with each breath. He could feel the tension building, the weight of his decision pressing on him. His breath had always been a mystery, something he had never understood. Now, it was the key to everything. To the survival of his species. To the survival of Earth. And for the first time in his life, Elias realized that he wasn't just fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for the survival of everyone he knew, everyone he had ever loved. But he still didn't know how to control the power within him. How could he become the savior the alien spoke of, when he didn't even know where to begin? The alien's voice broke his thoughts. Time is running out, Elias. The decision is yours. As Elias faced the alien, his breath steadying in his chest, he knew that whatever choice he made, it would change everything. Elias stood frozen, his mind torn between the terrifying possibilities laid before him. The alien's words reverberated in his chest, a constant reminder of the weight of the decision he had to make. The war is upon us. It is up to you to decide how it ends. How could he, one man, be expected to make such a choice? How could his breath, something so intimate, so personal, be the weapon to decide the fate of humanity? His heart raced, but something deep inside him, something primal, surged to the surface. The alien was right about one thing: he had no choice anymore. His very existence, his breath, had been twisted into something far beyond his control. But that didn't mean he had to surrender to it. No, he would fight. Fight not because he was destined to do so, but because humanity, with all its flaws and imperfections, deserved a chance to survive. As the alien stared at him, its eyes glowing with an eerie sense of expectation, Elias took a deep breath. He had no idea what his next move would be, but he could feel his body, his breath, preparing for something monumental. His chest tightened, and an almost electric hum filled the room as the power within him began to surge. Elias, Samuel's voice came through the earpiece again, urgent. You need to make a move. We can't hold them off much longer. The resistance members had set up an outer perimeter, hoping to delay the alien force from advancing further. But Elias knew that time was running out. The alien had already started sending out its forces, and if Elias didn't act soon, they'd be overwhelmed. His breath deepened as he concentrated, feeling the purity of it coursing through him. It was as if his very lungs had become attuned to the world around him, sensitive to every molecule, every shift in the air. It wasn't just a biological process anymore. His breath was something else entirely. Something powerful. He could feel the alien's presence like a weight on his chest, but it wasn't fear that fueled him. It was something stronger, something human. Elias had spent his entire life searching for answers to his condition. But now, he understood, his breath wasn't a curse. It was a gift. A gift he would use to protect everything that he had fought to keep. His friends. His family. His planet. He raised his hand, and with it, his breath began to change. The air around him seemed to shimmer, his every exhale creating a ripple that distorted the space itself. The alien's eyes flickered with something approaching recognition. It understood what Elias was doing. It understood that Elias was no longer just a weapon, it was as if Elias had become something beyond what it had anticipated. But even as the alien's gaze sharpened, Elias knew he wasn't ready to face them head-on, not yet. His power, while immense, was still raw, untamed. He needed time to master it, to understand it fully. Samuel, Elias said, his voice steady. Get the others. We're taking the fight to them. Samuel hesitated for a moment. Elias, are you sure? We've never seen anything like this before. You could. I have to try, Elias interrupted, his voice filled with determination. I can't let them win. I won't. The alien didn't move, but Elias could feel its presence shift, as if it were assessing his decision, considering its next move. It was waiting, biding its time. And in that waiting, Elias found his resolve. The room began to tremble, the walls vibrating as if responding to the energy within Elias. His breath, already pure, now seemed to take on an almost tangible form. It expanded, growing more potent with each exhale, as though the very air was bending to his will. He stepped forward, each movement fluid, the sound of his breath the only noise in the heavy silence. He reached out with his hand, feeling the pull of his own energy, of his power, connecting with the space around him. The walls, the floor, the very room seemed to hum with the force of his presence. "I don't know what you are," Elias spoke to the alien, his voice calm but unwavering, "but I know who I am. I'm human. And that's something you'll never understand." With a deep breath, Elias unleashed his power. A shockwave of pure, concentrated energy shot outward, a force unlike anything the alien had ever encountered. The glass walls of the chamber cracked under the pressure, shattering into a million pieces as the blast reverberated through the facility. The alien staggered back, its form flickering and distorting under the intensity of Elias's breath. But even as it recoiled, its eyes narrowed, its voice low with a warning. "You are not the only one who can wield power, Elias Harper," it said, its voice tinged with cold fury. "You are but a piece in a game far beyond your understanding. The war will come. And we will rise." The words chilled Elias to the core, but he stood his ground. This wasn't just a fight for his survival anymore. This was a fight for all of humanity. And he would not back down. The alien's form began to shimmer, preparing for a counterattack, but Elias, now fully in control of his breath, focused all his energy into one final surge. With a single, powerful exhale, he released everything he had. The room exploded in a brilliant flash of light, the alien's presence dissipating as the blast tore through the facility. Elias felt his strength waning, the last remnants of his power draining from him, but he had done it. The alien threat, for now, was vanquished. Elias collapsed to his knees, his breath ragged, but there was no time to rest. The battle was far from over. The war had only just begun. Elias sat on the cold, concrete floor, his chest heaving with the effort it took to breathe. Every inhale seemed to bring him closer to collapse, but he forced himself to stay awake. The alien's presence had faded, but the battle wasn't over. He could feel it. Deep down, he knew that his fight was just beginning. Around him, the remnants of the high-security facility were a mess of shattered glass, twisted metal, and burning debris. The resistance members, Samuel, the others, were moving quickly, securing the area, ensuring the alien forces wouldn't be able to regroup. But Elias didn't care about that. Not right now. His mind was focused on something else entirely. The alien had told him something that had haunted him: the war will come. And we will rise. It wasn't over. The fight had only begun, and it was far bigger than just him. Elias had just fought off one alien force, but what about the rest of them? What was this war the alien spoke of, and how could he, just one man, stand against it? "Elias," Samuel's voice broke through his thoughts. The older man knelt beside him, his eyes filled with concern. "You did it. You held them off." Elias looked up at Samuel, his expression weary but resolute. "But it's not over, is it? There's more to this than just what we've seen." Samuel nodded, his face grim. "Yes. The alien forces are vast, Elias. They're preparing for something much bigger. The fight you just won, that was only the beginning. We're facing a war that could last centuries." Elias exhaled slowly, his breath still strange, still unlike anything he had ever known. It wasn't just a symptom anymore, it was part of him, a part of his soul, and now, he understood what it meant. He understood the true power within him. But more importantly, he understood what that power could mean for humanity's future. "I can't fight this war alone," Elias said quietly. "I can't do this by myself. We need to prepare. We need to unite." "You're right," Samuel agreed, his eyes hardening with determination. "The resistance will help. We'll work with the others, unite the world's forces, gather everything we need. We'll make sure humanity stands a chance." Elias stood up, his body still shaking with exhaustion, but his resolve was stronger than ever. "We need to learn everything we can about them. We need to know what they want, what they're capable of. And we need to be ready. Not just for a battle, but for the future. We can't keep running. We have to take control. Samuel smiled, his eyes gleaming with respect. You've come a long way, Elias. A lot further than I ever thought possible. You may be the key to humanity's survival after all. Elias turned toward the horizon, his eyes scanning the darkened sky, still unsure of what awaited. There was so much left to do, so much that still didn't make sense. But he couldn't allow himself to get lost in the unknown. He couldn't let fear dictate his actions. If humanity was going to survive, it needed more than just a warrior, it needed a leader. And Elias was ready to become that leader, no matter what the cost. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the cool breeze on his face, grounding himself in the present. This was his purpose. This was his fight. And no matter how difficult the road ahead, Elias knew he had something that the aliens didn't understand: hope. Humanity's strength wasn't in its perfection, it was in its resilience. The power to adapt, to survive, to rise above challenges no matter how insurmountable they seemed. This was what made humans strong, and it was something Elias would never lose sight of. And in that moment, as the stars began to appear overhead, Elias made a vow to himself, a vow that would carry him through the battles to come. He wouldn't let the alien forces take his world. He wouldn't let them destroy what humanity had built. Because humanity was more than just a species. It was a will, a spirit, that no invader could break. And Elias would fight to protect it, one breath at a time. Life lesson: sometimes, the greatest power doesn't lie in what we were born with, but in what we choose to do with it. Elias's journey shows us that, no matter how overwhelming the challenges, the true strength of humanity lies in its ability to rise, to adapt, and to unite in the face of adversity. It's our resilience, not our perfection, that defines us, and that is what will carry us through the toughest battles life throws our way.